Federal government in the week imposed a 7-year ban on the establishment of new federal universities, polytechnics and colleges of education, citing the proliferation of underutilized institutions, overstretched resources and a drop in academic quality. Now, the decision was approved at the Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by President Bola Tinubu, following a presentation by the Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa. Now, the Federal Executive Council, however, approved 9 new universities despite the ban. I might add, private universities. Now, according to the Minister of Education, the challenge in Nigeria's tertiary education system was no longer about access, but adequate infrastructure and quality staffing. At the moment, a number of federal universities operate far below capacity, with some having fewer than 2,000 students. Now, the minister warned that if the proliferation continues, Nigeria risks producing ill-prepared graduates, eroding the value of Nigerian degrees internationally, and worsening unemployment or employability. Meanwhile, the federal government unveiled the Tertiary Institution Staff Support Fund, that's SSF. Now, a welfare initiative aimed at improving the financial well-being of staff in federal universities, polytechnics and colleges of education. The scheme, launched in partnership with the Ministry of Education, TED Fund, and the Bank of Industry, offers interest-free loans of up to 10 million naira to all confirmed staff of federal tertiary institutions with a 12-month repayment moratorium. Right, joining me now in the studio is a professor of communications, Bayes University, Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Also joining me from Port Harcourt is an educator, Dr. Ikechi Nwaogo. Welcome to the program, both of you gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, so where do we start? All right, let me establish your thoughts on the federal government freezing the licensing of federal universities for the next 7 years. They are saying, look, the issue is not about access. It's about getting the right quality infrastructure-wise and, you know, what we produce out of our universities, and what we churn out every year. Professor Adeniyi, let me start with you. Is this the fix? Is this the measure that will actually fix Nigeria's tertiary institutions?
Well, perhaps, I think we should try to put it in context first and foremost. There are two approaches in which government can use, to bring about this kind of regulation. That means when they are concerned with growing number of institutions and less intake, they could either allow market forces, the forces of demand and supply to determine whether a university will survive or not, or come in with a regulatory amount, which they have done now, by placing a ban, on future establishment of universities. But that's on the one hand. On the other hand, government is still silent. Or perhaps they said they're going to review it at a later time. They're still silent with respect to private universities. Remember, NUC told us the other day that the new administration in the NUC inherited about over 500 requests, and out of the over 70 that are still alive, they were able to register 9, which means that we are dealing with a situation where applications, interest in establishing university education, has to be managed. It has to be understood within the context of universities being established, whether by private or government, either to preserve a name, a legacy, or to pursue or fulfill a mission or a vision, as the case could be. Yes, we know there are some universities, there are some countries around the world that have universities in thousands. India has over 5,000, Indonesia over 3,000, United States over 3,000, Brazil, Mexico, they have it in their thousands.
As at the last time I checked, Prof, not to break your line of thought there, Nigeria has about 766 tertiary institutions, and that would include universities, polytechnics, monotechnics, and of course colleges of education.
Yeah, well, now we're talking about universities. You know, if what tertiary education could be up to 700. Universities are still about 300 in Nigeria, thereabout, or even in up to 300. Yeah, but like I said, it's okay for a government to come in with some regulatory mechanism, but it shouldn't vitiate the clamor or the quest for education, you know, amongst, you know, the burgeoning number of young people who are seeking university education, considering the importance of education for the liberation of the mind, the growing of confidence, and more, and in the physical perspective, you know, for growing the nation's human capacity. But that capacity, or the functions of the university education, actually should also be understood, you know, against the background of the need to provide, you know, requisite facilities and utilities for them to function as universities, as the name is supposed to be. You know, proper funding is key, just like we have seen in sections of the world, you know. If there's no funding, there will be no infrastructure, conducive environment cannot be provided. And government for public universities is supposed to provide, you know, the resources for these facilities and utilities. Welcome development, no doubt, but again, there should be a balance in the way these policies are implemented. Remember also that sections of the National Assembly are interested in having universities in different constituencies. That's why we're seeing
so the licensing has become politicized somewhat, but we'll come to that. Let me bring in Ikechi Nwaogo. I mean, you are an educationist yourself. Let me even take it from this angle. Do you think the proliferation of private universities may have contributed to, you know, the state of affairs with federal universities in Nigeria? Just like you heard Professor Adeniyi here say that even lawmakers, they all want to have their own universities. Do you think this may have contributed somewhat to the falling standard of Nigeria's federal universities?
Well, it's a combination of many things. If the standards are falling, it might be as a result of proprietorship. So what interest is the federal government paying to the established universities? We're talking about shortfalls in lecturer supply. We're talking about poor research grants. We're talking about end allowances. We're talking about strikes and all that. What are the strikes for? Now, let's look at it from this angle. Every year, we churn out from the UTME, JAMB releases results for about 2,000 candidates. Let's assume that every year 2,000 candidates are able to get into the universities. Okay, in 10 years, that's 20,000. In 20 years, that's 40,000. But then what's the carrying capacity of all the universities in Nigeria? We probably have like maybe 700,000 or something. So we don't even have enough infrastructure, enough classroom structures and all that to carry all of the students. And so what happens? Some of the students would want to go to other universities in other climes, okay, nearby universities, some of which from research don't even have as much or have as much quality as the universities in Nigeria. So if the federal government as a proprietor of the federal universities is serious about setting up universities, what are the standards? What are the minimum requirements? Are we ensuring that there's a blueprint? Where are we headed? What do we want to achieve? Like Prof was talking about the quality of graduates from these universities. I'm looking beyond jobs. I mean, if job creation is the only thing, then it's not good enough. I'm looking at half the students who graduate from our universities being competent to set up their own entrepreneurial infrastructure, entrepreneurial facility to further consume other graduates who are not able to do that. So Nigeria can stand at par, okay, economically, globally, leading the trail in some of these schemes. But the federal government doesn't seem to be paying attention to all of those things. We won't just blame everything on one thing. We're saying that federal government, hey, what does it take? There should be some benchmarking with some leading universities in the world. What do they have that we don't have? Okay, right. And at the end of the day, the federal government places this 7-year ban not just to say we're not taking in 7 years. We're going back to research. We're going back to say how can we intensify effectiveness of our own schools? How can we sit down, go back to the drawing board and redraw what is lacking and how can we create the repair works? Then 7 years works. We can now say, oh, beyond 7, let's stretch it to 10 years or let's even reduce it to 5 years. But Nigerians want to be sure that at the end of the ban period, okay, the federal government comes back with an improvement of service, with an expansion of scope, and ensuring that the universities really deliver on their promise. On that note, we can now say, okay, we don't have the carrying capacity. How many private universities are we approving for Nigerian children? How many alternate arrangements are we making? Okay, so but what is important is these numbers, 20,000 students in 10 years, 40,000 students in 20 years, we must have answers as to how much of them we can consume, how many of these students begging, to be educated can actually be consumed, and be rest assured, I don't need to go for my master's in any foreign university to gain full assumption as a scholar, having been schooled in the Nigerian environment.
Yes, thank you very much for that submission, Nwaogo. Prof, you mentioned funding earlier, and I thought we should push it forward, but I mean, this is a good time to talk about it. Public investments in Nigeria's universities account for a mere 5% of the gross domestic product, the GDP. And you talk about funding earlier. Now, falling budgetary allocations over the years at both the state and federal levels. Is this where autonomy for universities is needed? Recall that every time ASU, Academic Staff Union of Universities, go on strike, one of their major demands is autonomy for the universities. Let's talk about that. How do you close the funding gap? Because apparently it looks like government alone cannot fund the universities or tertiary institutions. Prof? Well,
again, there are two ways to look at it. First, the question of autonomy. It's okay to talk about university autonomy, but we imagine university autonomy in a climate, where the political economy is very robust.
Right.
But here we are with a problematic economy. We are struggling with most things. And universities as an institution is also struggling. So if you leave them alone, and you are not allowing them to charge, in accordance with the demands of the market, there's going to be a shortfall in their ability to meet their needs, because public universities, for instance, are not allowed to charge economic rates. And even private universities, too, are hardly able to charge economic rate because the essence of education, the essence of providing an educational institution is actually not profit-making. Ideally, it's not supposed to be profit-making. And if that philosophy is understood, there's no way in which you can take away the importance of government grants, government allocation, the importance of private sector participation through funding of programs, chairs, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, that's why universities understood as a center for collaboration and partnership. It's not supposed to be independent, in the real sense of the word, but it's about collaboration, synergy with institutions, private individuals, that are blessed, further to the need to advance the system at the level of
endowment funds.
Further to the need to advance system at the level of pedagogy, et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, it's also the need for us to underscore why government, should be much more responsive than they are presently doing. It's an institution where we see the resources are being plunged into other sectors, some of them sectors that are not too salutary, that are not beneficial to the future of the country, as the case could be. And oftentimes,
do you think government is just paying lip service to the idea of wanting our, tertiary institutions to be at par with what you find in the best, of the world?
Of course, that goes without saying, because we know, like my colleague in Port Harcourt said, we know what universities are like in other countries, and if we want to really compete with them and probably improve our ranking, we cannot undermine the importance of funds and more funds, you know, because we cannot necessarily say we do not have these funds. It's just about priority. I remember Ngozi as well that there's this popular saying about, is it UNICEF, you know, saying that for a nation that wants to grow its educational sector, the annual budget should be in excess of 25 or 26%. I'm not too sure now, but now we're doing far less than 10%, which is not helpful at the level of public education, public university funding. Well,
now, yeah, Dr. Nwaogo, very, very quickly, we don't have much time. Only 2 Nigerian universities, one a private university, the other one, of course, well, I mean, one of Nigeria's top ivory towers, actually make the first 1,000 universities in the world. In fact, the private university ranks 801, and the University of Ibadan, let me just put it out there, is a 1,001, ranks between 1,001 and 1,200, which means we're nowhere near where we should be ideally. And this private university is the best in Nigeria as we speak. Now, how do we ensure, how do we bring back tertiary institutions to the position where they should be? Very quickly, if you can, what do we need to do to begin to fix this fundamentally?
Okay, so if you look at the ranking thing, it comes on indices. So what exactly are they pointing towards? So you could look at how much of their research papers are referenced. So how many research papers from this university and that university will be referenced. Sometimes we even look at environment. We look at employability factor. We look at, you know, a lot of indices. So one university might be best in this and they're not best in that, okay, and then the other university. So I'm not even too bothered about the ranking thing. I'm only bothered about the quality of the graduates and the pride of place they occupy in the global community, and that's what government should be invested in. So I pick up my certificate from a Nigerian university, a government-owned university. How far can I go with it? Like in tech, we say, what's the signal strength? So I go to certain places and they say, oh, we're sorry, this can't fly, because there's a lot of malpractice, there's a lot of you know, lecturer harassment, there's a lot of intimidation and all of that. And you know, these are no-brainers. You really don't need money to get lecturers to stop harassing students. You don't need money. You just need to set up a panel and have one person or two as an example. So let's deal with the low-cost areas first. I
have to come in here very quickly. I'd like to get your reaction to this federal government plan launching in partnership with the Ministry of Education and TED Fund to actually give loans to you know, confirmed staff of federal institutions. Does it sound like music to your ear with a repayment period of 12 months? Very quickly, Nwaogo.
What's the money for? Are you trying to give them a loan to go and build houses and buy cars and all that? No, they've already asked you in the ASU agreement, we need loans to further research. We need loans for exchange programs. So don't be sneaky about this, okay? Get ASU back on the table and begin to engage. What do they really need extra money for, extra funding for? And if you can deal with those issues, then they may be more penitent, okay, at the end of the day, in resolving the issues and boosting even the idea of, you know, schooling.
Thank you very much. Professor Adeniyi, I mean, what do you have to say about this 10 million?
Yeah, I think government should be more concerned about meeting the demands of ASU. And from that framework, the needs of lecturers can be better met, really, at that global point of view. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a professor of communication based university right here in Abuja, and of course, Dr. Ikechi Nwaogo, education expert, joining us from Port Harcourt. That's as much we can take on this edition of This Week. Today, thanks to our production team here in Abuja, Lagos, and London, to join us same time next week for another exciting edition. I am Ngozi Alebu.